Hey there, welcome to Money Never Sleeps, a podcast that looks inside the head of entrepreneurs and at what makes them do what they do. I'm Pete Townsend, your co-host of Money Never Sleeps, along with Owen Fitzgerald. This episode of Money Never Sleeps is kindly sponsored by Ireland's fintech and financial services recruitment specialists, Top Tier Recruitment. If you or a colleague need help attracting and retaining great talent for your fintech or financial services company, it is highly advisable that you build a relationship with a team at Top Tier Recruitment. You can find them at toptierrecruitment.com and tell them we sent you. In this episode, Owen and I talked to Eddie Dillon, founder and CEO of CreditLogic, who are powering simplified and scalable mortgage origination. Owen and I both have known Eddie for a while, as before he took the leap with CreditLogic, he was on the speaking circuit with his role as head of innovation for one of the European banks here in Dublin. Got a lot of time for Eddie, as our backstories have some interesting overlap. But let's just let that come out of the wash on the interview with Eddie Dillon on this week's episode of Money Never Sleeps.
Money never sleeps, pal.
Here we go again. Welcome to Money Never Sleeps. We're recording today from the offices of our sponsor, Top Tier Recruitment. I'm Pete Townsend.
And I'm Owen Fitzgerald.
And we're here with Eddie Dillon, founder and CEO of CreditLogic. Welcome to the show, Eddie.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We're all pals here. We know where you hail from, Eddie. We know where you're coming from. For our listeners, I'm going to ask you to kind of go through your backstory. But first, I would like to personally welcome Owen Fitzgerald back to the show.
Thanks, Pete.
After a little bit of an absence. But for all our listeners, if Owen isn't on the show, it's a good thing for Irish startups. Because he's out doing his thing, raking the coals.
Giving away money.
Yes, going out to get the money. So, but welcome back. Good to have you back. We missed you, bro. So Eddie, back to you, pal. Tell us a bit about where you came from and what got you to this point.
Yeah, that's an interesting starting point because my wife thinks I'm a complete narcissist. So the idea of actually having an ability in an opening question like that to talk about myself. How long is the podcast?
Were you a middle child?
I'd say we'll get 3 episodes of this from one question.
Go for it.
So, believe it or not, I started off as an accountant. So I trained with PwC. I had 4 wonderful years there, but it didn't take the collective brain power of all the partners in PwC to determine that I was an absolutely appalling accountant.
Yeah.
And I suppose the thing in that was I struggled to find a level of excitement providing assurances on accounts that were ultimately 6 months old. And very quickly I transitioned as a consequence of that into more of a consulting corporate finance role.
I saw that. You did a bit of time in Boston, right?
Yeah, that was great, yeah.
Yeah. And then I saw equity fundraising projects for startup early stage tech companies in your LinkedIn profile.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, so that was 98, 99.
Yeah.
So that was a fairly frenetic period. And my time there coincided with an absolute boom in funding and focus of tech companies, and concluded with an absolute implosion of liquidity in those markets. So another fascinating time
At a young age.
Yeah, well, I was a young age, but I'm like any LinkedIn profile, I'm sure it had, director written down there, but ultimately I was carrying paper and facilitating deal makers.
Yeah, absolutely. But you went through it and you got something out of it, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, no, but what was fascinating there was working with quite visionary management teams and seeing how they saw this is, 20 years ago, and the same conversations about disruption in every industry, not necessarily focused specifically on the technology, but rather on a business domain issue that they were trying to address. So I worked on a number of business to consumer propositions that were ultimately the genesis of platform business models that exist today. And whilst I appreciated what they were trying to achieve, I never appreciated the scale and how it would ultimately take 20 years to come to fruition. But so fascinating time.
Okay. And then I saw you had a bit of a crossover into London and Monaco for a little while.
Yeah, international man of mystery. So what I was approached about, I suppose one thing about my career is that up until recently I had probably a fairly risk-averse career in that I was I had a routine salary payment hitting my account every month, which is something I still lust after. But I did try and go a slightly lesser covered trail. So when I was approached about a corporate finance position, advisory position in-house for a shipping company in France that had just or was going through a private equity-backed MBO. And the role involved undertaking a series of bolt-on acquisitions with the view to transforming the business model of that organisation. It was already quite a large organisation. It had 2,000 commercial ships under management and 25,000 crew on its books. So it was a big entity. But what I found remarkable was that there was quite a visionary CEO at the time, and he wanted to transform the group and the way in which it operated, but recognised it was very difficult to do that sort of internally. So undertook a number of acquisitions to realise the group and entity that he wanted to deliver. And so when it came to revenue, culture, it was a real awakening that you can actually acquire all of those things, or acquire the genesis of them and then embody them in the rest of the group. So it was actually quite consistent with the type of role that I had been doing previously, in that I was working very closely with a management team to deliver their particular strategy.
Okay. And then after that, that's where the whole KBC experience started.
Yeah, so then into the world of financial services, where I remain to this day. And
you touched a few different areas during your time with KBC, didn't you?
I had 3 different careers, and that's probably why people ask me why at a relatively late stage in a career, why I'd be doing something akin to a midlife crisis, a startup at this stage.
They say the most effective entrepreneurs are operating in their 40s, right?
Yeah, but that's when they strike success.
Yeah.
As in, they've spent the previous 20 years, giving it a lash and having, sort of modicums of success, but paving the trail. But the reason that this has happened late in my career was that I was indulged with a view to having quite a enterprising or creative career within KBC, and that's something that they were fantastic in facilitating. So I started again in more of a corporate finance mode, working with management teams to put in debt structures and financial solutions for them. And then the financial crisis came along. So I worked, given my background, worked on a strategic review of what our very existence was as a business model. And the immediate requirement at that point was to plug a funding gap. So we had at that point been a completely unbranded, as in there was zero brand awareness of it as an entity, and established a retail deposit capability. But there was very, very significant early traction. So we said, well, ultimately that could be the genesis of a wider proposition. So we sold an investment case to the shareholder KBC Group, who backed it very considerably to develop out a full service retail bank. And we spent a number of years doing that, acquired over 300,000 customers, which is very significant in a sort of an inert banking market that we have here. But the final evolution of that, and that was an extraordinary time. That was it was starting up a well-capitalized retail bank.
With a paycheck.
With a paycheck,
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. But then we probably went through a period of introspection where we went, okay, well, this is interesting. We're getting good linear growth of customer numbers, and the proposition is good, and we've built up a very hit a desirable level of market share, say in lending products and mortgages, which we'll come to in a second. But really, we'd built a quite a comparable business model, not a disruptive business model. As in, you couldn't necessarily see how the retail banking proposition differed significantly from our peers, and indeed against that of the rest of the group. So we recognised the need to accelerate digital capability. No great wisdom in that, but the key thing there is about execution. So the group decided to centralise a digital transformation function out of Dublin, for Dublin to lead the development and testing of all levels of internal disruption, to partner with fintechs, etc., wherever it may be, to deploy capabilities. So I led that team, which was great. We established a team of 100 people here, and developed and tested capability and launched it across 6 other different European markets.
Right.
So that was, I mean, again, I felt massively indulged that I had that opportunity to once again do something quite enterprising.
Yeah, I mean, I always felt, and the way I've always carried myself is put yourself in positions that you're completely unqualified for. Was there any of that during your time at KBC that, listen, just go embrace these new challenges, run for it, take it, go for it?
I find that funny that you've actually asked that question with like a moderately straight face. I mean, Pete,
I'm dead serious. That's what I do.
Me. I think I revel in circumstances where I'm deeply unqualified.
Yeah.
I'm not qualified to sit and participate in this podcast. But you had a big glaring gap where it was just going to be yourself reintroducing yourself to Owen. So, I remember leaving a meeting and being charged to set up with budget one particular project. I'm trying to be reasonably vague here, and going downstairs to my office and Googling it. Having absolutely no idea, but yet I just sold the proposition and the commercial, how imperative it is that we develop this capability, blah, blah, blah. And then going downstairs and okay, well, I've got over the first hurdle. Now we know that we're going to do it and there's budget allocated to do it and I'm charged to do it.
Yeah.
Now, what the hell do I need to do next?
Yeah.
So when it comes to being unqualified, I mean, there's unqualified and then there is actually nearly negligently unqualified. So I often find myself in that position. But one thing that I do, I think that when you, I don't mean this to sound in any arrogant way, but if you have a domain expertise or a certain understanding, and when it came to retail financial services, I'd got a fairly robust understanding of what customer dimensions are, where customers' expectations were evolving to, the solutions that were out there. So if you can knit all of those bits together, you're never going to be too far away from it.
Absolutely. And I find the same thing when you being able to make these relational jumps from subject matter to subject matter. If you have been operating in the financial markets for X number of years, once you get to that point of trying to kind of figure things out and someone puts a new topic in front of you, you're going to get a lot quicker than someone who hasn't been through that.
But I think that comes back in some ways to like financial services. It's not like rocket science or like I take my wife, she's a classically trained musician. She was practicing last night, she's looking at sheet music. It makes no sense to me. I've done corporate investment banking, some wealth management stuff. Like it's all banking, inverted commas. So the reality is you're never that far away. You're not starting from something, even in that example, where you know nothing. It's still banking fundamentally. So there'll always be enough that you can kind of wing it to some degree that you figure it out.
Completely agree. I mean, ultimately, we got to remember that we're consumers of financial services. So in our daily lives, we have a fluency in the way in which we want to carry out our affairs. So that is as critical a viewpoint as any other.
Absolutely. Bringing things forward. So you and I met, Eddie, probably a little over a year ago. I think, Owen, we were at an event. Eddie was there. You introduced us. Yep. And I had heard about you for probably a few months before that, just on the speaker circuit. Eddie Dillon's talking about this, Eddie Dillon's talking about that, which is a good thing. Start building your profile. Yes, he does. He's good at it. So tell us about CreditLogic, what it is, and why you're doing it now.
Good question. It was a bit of a sordid introduction there to that particular tale. We met, we were introduced at an event. I was expecting dinner and a movie. One went there. Didn't get that, Pete.
Well,
I just got an invitation to this podcast a year and a bit later.
But actually, because we met before that while you were overlapping. I had an idea at the time, but where did the idea? Because I'm trying to think back.
The idea.
How did the idea come about? To the sense that you were exploring it enough that when we met the first time, it was how could I take this further? Yeah.
So firstly, I don't think you'll meet anyone in retail financial services that will claim that anything that CreditLogic does or represents is anything is anything remarkably innovative. It's a particular customer issue that has existed forever. But how did that transition or how did I feel that it was mobilizing me? I had felt for years that this was an area that was ripe for disruption, because there's a number of things. The two fundamental things happening in banking that I find fascinating are GDPR and open banking, where the combination of both means that banks previously had a proprietary right to consumers' financial data and thus their entire lives, whereas GDPR puts that control back in the hands of the consumer, and open banking means that that banks have ultimately to open their previously precious data vaults at the behest of those consumers. And the combination of those factors means that the whole thing is blown wide open, and that sort of banks of scale and banks of big significant brands no longer have that if you like data IP, if you want to call it that. So that was one thing that was emerging. Secondly, the mortgage market and consumer demand was growing exponentially, and even if you look at the Irish market, mortgage demand is doubling, as in there's an undersupply of credit in the market, and yet consumers were demanding a digital experience and none existed. Absolutely none existed. So that's the first bit. The second bit was that the process was chronically inefficient, in that only 40% of applications translate to income, as in they don't draw down. So an awful lot of effort is undertaken and no completion. And then the final thing is that anyone who was in this market space, the banks, brokers, advisors, they're already at full processing capacity. So if you add those three dimensions, the question for me and the market was, well, how can anyone efficiently capture growth? And you'll efficiently capture growth by delivering the customer experience, having the business velocity and the efficiencies internally to be able to capture that growth. And those questions were not being answered by anywhere. As in, banks were looking at building or buying. If there was a buy decision, well, where is that solution? And most particularly, where is that solution relevant in this marketplace? And that didn't exist.
But what pushed you obviously to make the jump then?
Well,
Was there a particular turning point, or?
There was a if you like, an alignment of factors that meant, right, I'm going to be the hero on a bar stool talking about an idea I had once or twice or multiple ideas, and I loathed that situation. In fact, that was incredibly stressful, because a number of things had come together. One, I had the counsel of someone who is now our non-exec chairman, who was fantastic in actually just counselling a level of rigour and understanding the full dimensions of what was going on. But most importantly, there was a concept, a business domain expertise, and a validated solution, and then the team. So the team behind CreditLogic is a pre-existing team that have worked very, very well together in the past, and have had form. We've failed together and succeeded together. And when you had those three dimensions, just went, well, listen, it's either now or never. There was always a compulsion to do something creative. I think my friends would always remark that it was unusual that if anyone was to be the conservative banker, it was unusual that it was me. And don't get me wrong, in an institutional existence, I would have been absolutely just dreadfully irritating to work with, because, in certain meetings where there was a certain level of, there would have been people just, okay, let's meet a consensus and let's just talk. I would be unfortunately, that person to constantly challenge, or to go, no, well, that doesn't, are we sure that's making sense? And constantly challenging. And sometimes you just want to, have that conservative team player. I was probably a bit more of an agitator.
Yeah. No, I think looking at your track record, Eddie, and seeing kind of moving from the corporate side, moving to, well, obviously in commercial banking, and then getting closer to the customer, I had a similar experience myself. The closer you get to the customer and the closer that you begin to understand their true problems, the more you want to go do something about it, right? So just with CreditLogic specifically, right, what, and I love the website, by the way, it looks great. I love how active it is and how that, the people sitting there in the background kind of come out at you. But what I saw on that was CreditLogic are powering simplified and scalable mortgage origination, right?
Yeah.
Is that it in a nutshell?
It is, yeah. That website's just changing as we speak, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry
All right.
about that. I must...
Feedback Pete's comments.
The which?
Let's feedback Pete's comments.
Absolutely,
Well, I like
yeah.
it. No, the first time I looked at it, I'm like, that's pretty
Well, like-
cool. These guys are listening.
I mean, that website is based off some random freelancer who did some work and branded the thing for about €50. So he was great value.
Gotcha.
But I think you've firstly, I think once you understand the consumer dimension, that was
Yeah.
your first point,
Yeah.
and I fundamentally agree. And in conventional financial services, there is an imposition of journeys that a bank feel that they need to provide, that when they're into the hands of the consumer, the consumers are going, well, why the hell do I have to do, why do I have to go through these steps? And they're friction in the modern world. Mm-hmm. And friction is just simply intolerable. So if you can actually get yourself into that mindset, first of all, and in removing any level of friction, that's what wins through. But CreditLogic is a digital lending platform.
Yeah.
There's three components. One is software to digitize the application process.
Yeah.
Secondly, it is analytics. And this is the critical element because experience is delivered through automation. And this analytics engine automates 80% of application processing. It is the intuitive review. It is the administrative review. And it provides prompts and a pre-credit score to the advisor. So the advisor can carry on with empathizing with the customer to get them through the process and advice. And then the final element, having streamlined that particular application file into a single data file, it integrates into the credit engine of lenders. So you have an integrated experience between consumer, applicant, their advisor, and the lender. So those three components mean that it is an infinitely better experience, and it is one that is infinitely more efficient.
Okay.
The 3 points are it's 50-50-50. The applicant will see a 50% reduction in the time and data that they need to provide.
Yeah.
Secondly, the advisor sees a 50% reduction in their time and administration, automating those tasks, and the lender sees a 50% reduction in the costs of new loan issue.
Yeah. Okay. This is reassuring to hear. Because a year ago, when you and I and Mary and Gavin first took a deep dive into your business, right, and where things were headed with that, the story you're telling me now is the same, right? Over the past year, kind of talk a bit about that and how things have continued to shape for you in terms of the value proposition that you're delivering. Firstly, to mortgage advisors, like you mentioned, also their customers, right? Because it's kind of a B2B to C, but then the network effect then of also enabling lenders to have a more digital input to their decision process. Wow. Can you talk about what you've learned over the last year with regards to that?
Sure. So we have a very deliberate route to market, and that has informed our prioritization. So our first customers, and those that are live currently, are mortgage brokers who are looking to get an outsized share of market growth, as in scalable mortgage customers. The volume of business that will be originated by our mortgage brokers in this market will increase by fourfold over the next number of years. So we've partnered with them to develop, to introduce the first product, which is our CreditLogic collecting application data, which delivers immediate efficiencies based on their current model. We've also been working with lenders to develop a standardized mortgage application data API, which is modeled on the standards developed for open banking. But one thing, our route to market has not changed at all, because we recognize that certain people who need a solution to an immediate problem, and also that banks and lenders can tend to take a longer time to go through their diligence process. So there's a longer sales cycle. So we've aligned our product and market strategy to align with the demands and needs of customers and their particular sales cycle. The one thing that I would say is that I can tend to be a little impetuous or energetic at times. But every Monday morning, we still have what we've done for years is our management meeting happens that is absolute bulletproof every Monday morning.
Yeah.
Which happened in my absence this morning.
Yeah.
And we talk about 4 things, and that is team, product, commercials, and financial. And there might be a hot theme of the week whereby you might be closing a funding round, or there might be some customer who's getting jumpy or excited. And that can tend to dominate the meeting. But if we don't talk about each of those 4 things and give equal weight to each, you're missing a beat. And that was the greatest learning. So the team element is, have we the right people, the right skills? Are they being enabled in the right way? We even do an engagement survey to make sure that they're, on a relative scale of between exhilarated and exhausted to feeling whether they're working on something purposeful. As in, we have adopted the good things of an institutional corporate existence to make sure we get a good temperature check. If you don't have, as in, without the team, without the, we have an in-house development team that are extraordinary people. And if we don't continue to facilitate that, the show's going to be over soon. The next thing is the product. Are we delivering the product in line with our milestones? Are we delivering the product that knits into the customer demands? Those customer demands that are immediate, not the ones that may, or, the speculative stuff that may happen in the future. Thirdly, the commercials. Are we having the right conversation with the right people at the right time? And we have a very, very strong commercial pipeline, which is great, but there's an awful lot of cups of coffee to get people to a point where they're signing platform services agreement. And then finally, it's the financials. Do we have the loot to keep the show on the road? Not overfunded. So the one learning is always to have equal weight to each of those 4 dimensions in every discussion.
Okay.
And changing Pete's question slightly, I suppose, how much then have you found the challenge stepping away from the corporate side in the last year? How much have you learned as an entrepreneur then versus, and how much have you taken from what you'd learned in past experience?
It's hard to know, as in, I'd turn the question back to you. What makes you, Owen?
We hit on this a year ago, and I said, listen, I see corporate Eddie, right? I could clearly see that, and what I had as slightly not amusing, but just I was anticipating you being able to succeed in doing this.
I amuse you?
Yeah. You amuse me? Funny guy. What am I, a clown? What am I, here to entertain you?
That East Coast accent brings a bit of validity to that.
There you go, pal.
I'm a bit scared.
No, but I remember kind of seeing that in you, and that I expected over the next year for you to kind of have some lessons learned in terms of, taking you out of the corporate world and putting you into the startup world, right? And were there some things kind of looking at that you, you're looking back on now and saying, ooh, I might not have expected that?
Sorry, I don't mean to sound that I haven't evolved or changed. I'm like a sponge, as in I find that I will seek out input or expertise no matter where I go. There is no irrelevant conversation. Someone has a perspective. I haven't done startup. Because startup, as far as I'm concerned, is one where there is a fundamental risk of failure. Startup, where in my previous world, greenfield operations had huge budgets and room for excuses. And I don't mean excuses personally, but I mean if things overrun, yes, that's embarrassing, but ultimately is not terminal.
Yeah.
So startup now is, as in, failure is interesting, but certainly not an option.
Yeah.
So I am a sponge in any conversation I have to learn and evolve, etc. And that was probably, you're probably less conditioned to listen to such an extent when you're in a comfortable corporate type of environment. So that's one thing. There's other certain elements that have I find an enormous capacity to get things done in a day, and you have where you remove elements of I don't mean that there needs to be certain governance protocols, routines, and controls in place in any corporate institution, but there's less so in a startup, which means that you control your diary, and you can get through matters at a level of pace and rigor that amazed all of us when we stepped out. But maybe the final element is I was so hugely encouraged by the willingness of people to help and assist and respect people making a crazy, idiotic move for someone, with a family, to throw it all on the line and give it a lash. And people really respect that. And I don't mean that as a sort of, we should meet for coffee one time as a sort of loose thing that never happens. But they really do get in behind you and are looking to support you in every way. And people emerge from every corner to assist that. So they're probably the three elements that have been most telling.
Okay. And would you say that last piece, because I know we've talked about it before, the value of those mentors that you've had, it's probably been invaluable, I suppose, in terms of how it's helped you make that move and grow as an entrepreneur, I suppose.
Yeah, what it does provide for someone like me is a level of affirmation. And so the bits that, you're in with the team and everything seems purposeful and great. But then you go away and there's this sort of a bit of a lonely period going, japers, I hope what I've just said there is right. And what, you have a core confidence in what you're doing, the way in which you're going about it, and the way in which you're looking to execute. But just having that sort of panel of advisors to provide the level of affirmation or indeed challenge, as in they have informed our proposition, they have tailored it, as in like any good business model, you need to kick the life out of it before it's fit for purpose. In KBC they had this. Belgians are fantastic in that they're very direct, whereas the Irish will talk around a subject for about half an hour, like I'm doing here. But the Belgians will just go yes or no. It's all black and white. And they used to have a process of strategic review called the murder board, where you would go into a panel, and they'd literally try and pull you. They call it the murder board, I mean, there's great value in that because everything is finer, better clipped as a result of a good, robust challenge, and where you are accepting of every challenge that you get as a valid challenge. And that's what mentors and advisors have offered, which is just invaluable.
What do you think in terms of some of your own personality traits that have been helpful to you over the past year, really? Now, you talked about impetuousness, but what else? What else is there that you think?
I think you really need to talk to Mary and Gavin, who you've both met, my co-founders, and probably turn the question into what are the bits that drive us absolutely bonkers.
Yeah.
But it's been a real learning for me in that certain styles or approaches don't necessarily elicit the best response from different people. So it is. When you're trying to create an environment, it's not an environment you can have a value system that you can collectively agree, but how you put those value systems in place, they can be destroyed by one conversation. You can set out and go like, we're going to be this, that, and the other thing, and which we did. But literally one conversation where there is anger or something is, someone's position is not respected or certain, the whole thing can fall apart. So I have certainly tailored my own behaviours to ensure that we do not dampen what we have, which is an absolutely fantastic environment, albeit in a dark basement in a repurposed unit, but we have a fantastic environment with great people, and that's the one thing I'm just paranoid about is that I do anything to negatively detract from that environment.
Okay. Anything from a year ago where when we first sat down to look at your business, Eddie, you were very the question I'm going to ask you right now. I kind of have an answer to it already, because the question is, when did you realize that you had something, right? Now, a year ago, asking you that, you answered that question for me, and you told me all about the business idea and why it was going to be effective and why it was working. Looking on since then, though, has there been a single moment in the last year where you said, oh, wow, yeah, this is actually going to work?
I greatly look forward to that particular moment, right?
Well, that's good. It might have happened already, but you're challenging yourself.
Like, I don't think you can ever. Well, I'd love that. I love the idea of sitting down and having a a pint with the guys and going like, yeah, fair play to ourselves.
Yeah.
but I like, what do we have now? We have a product to market which is software developed, tested, and people and customers paying for it, having validated the business benefits that they get from it in a development cycle of 9 to 10 months. So I think that's great. But we recognize that that's interesting. The next product is really interesting.
Yeah.
And the next evolution of that is interesting again. So we are, I think we will always be really hungry to get to the next stage. And I don't think we'll ever have that. I mean, we'll certainly have the pint, but we certainly won't be sitting there going, "Jeepers, that's great. I think, I think we've nailed it now," because I think that sort of hunger, our ambition continues to grow.
I see it on your face, man.
That's hunger for food. So yeah, I would like to say that there's a core appetite there for even greater things.
Oh, absolutely. And that's what we talked about before we started recording today, right? Is that Owen, Norio Ventures turned 3 yesterday from a company and corporation perspective. And I was saying to Eddie before we got on that my wife and I noted that with a bottle of bubbly last night. And we were done before 8 o'clock and moved on to something else. And Eddie said, geez, I thought, Pete, there was a bit more craziness in you.
But sorry, I think I should point in and just clarify that the something else there was peppermint tea.
Yes, it was. It was. It can be quite settling. And if that takes away from my rock star persona, that's okay. But no, the point is that, yeah, you note it. It's a success. Great. What did you learn from it? Well, don't even think about it from that perspective when you're drinking bubbly with your wife. But then move on. And what's the next challenge ahead? And the next challenge ahead is getting going at 6 o'clock the next morning to take on the new week, right? And I can clearly sense that. But I totally expect that there has been some validation for you on this journey so far over the last year that said you are going in the right direction.
I think undoubtedly we're going in the right direction. I think that there's a customer appetite both domestically and internationally. We also spoke just before coming on about the when you're looking to validate your plan, and when you see a potentially competitive business model in another market, you go, "Jeepers, you used to have that pit in your stomach." But now we have an inner resolve, a confidence that what we're doing works for the customer, the segments, the areas that we want to penetrate. We've also identified other markets that are relevant for us in when the time is appropriate for us to look beyond Ireland. So we have that confidence. We know we're going in the right direction, but you don't celebrate on mile 4 when you're doing a marathon. Equally, you don't sprint the first 4 miles. I mean, this is a long game. You got to keep it moving. And so many have failed by one of those 4 pillars that I spoke about, the team, product, commercials, and financial, because there's been a lack of attention paid to one particular element. So yes, we're confident.
Okay.
But are we complacent? Far from it.
Yeah. No, I get that. You talked a lot about your team, and the question I was going to ask was around who you lean on, but it's clear that the way that you've built the team and the way that you work together, I'm hearing that you lean on them quite a bit, right, in terms, and as well as your mentors. But who do you think leans on you?
I wouldn't even give that. I have no idea. I wouldn't even give that. I would see that as irrelevant nearly. And,
Yeah.
and I don't mean that as
No,
a
that's
question, but it's
One of the answers we got from a prior guest, Paul Noonan, was that his dog leans on him.
That's another thing. That suddenly we now have a dog in the office, who's the office administrator stroke PA. So perhaps the dog leans on me for a bit of food at lunchtime. But I'll go back to what your previous point was. I'm not talking about any sort of utopian workplace. Mm-hmm. But one thing is that we really value the contributions of everyone that's there. Yeah. And you really value the contributions because if they are not accretive to your values and behaviours and the atmosphere in a small, constrained office, we have the phrase, we've spoken about it before, Pete, but marmalade, which means, and that's another one that I've stolen off our chairman, but marmalade is effectively that our survival as an entity means that we skin cash as frugally as humanly possible, and only to spend on valuable, as in software engineering. So we've got an environment full of those people who are delivering a sort of commercial and viable product. So we do have I lean on them because they're delivering everything that we are as an entity.
Absolutely. Marmalade, spread it thin.
Spread it thin, exactly. Yeah,
I gotcha.
Okay, well, I mean, we could probably talk for hours as we have done, and it's nice being back, and I could continue to talk for hours. But look, the question I always love to ask, Eddie, is what would people not expect to know about you?
You know what? I should have listened to the end of these podcasts. I didn't realise that as in there's usually an inspiring quote or give us a little bit of background. I didn't realise what would you not expect of me. I'm a passionate skier, which I find interesting because there's not a mountain in Ireland that's covered in snow.
Eddie the Eagle.
You're not quite. The similar looks. But that involves trying to go for a week of skiing without a ski lift, where it's a combination of mountaineering and backcountry skiing. Yeah, no, well you're effectively skinning up the mountain.
Yeah, my sister does that. Yeah,
so you go 6 days in complete solitude, and you just go from remote mountain hut to remote mountain hut, but you don't see another human being from one end of the week to the next. So that's sort of a passionate, indulgent hobby of mine, which is slightly unusual for someone who could happily stand at a bar and talk nonsense.
Yeah, my sister tells me that the hardest part is the trek in, and I think it's called Pear Lake or something like that out in California that they do, they ski at, and they do the telemarking and the skins and all that. And they say the hardest part is the first hike in because they're towing behind them this sled full of all their provisions. And sometimes those provisions include things like tequila, and those bottles can be quite heavy.
Yeah, well, in fact, I got one of my greatest lessons on motivation on a Swiss mountain a few years ago, where it was a 4,000 meter peak, and we're not conditioned to go anything above 20 meters above sea level in this country. And we were going up one particular mountain, and we had a Slovenian mountain guide, and these guys have a little badge that says they are, rock stars of the mountain. And I was struggling, I was falling behind, and I was going at about 0.1 mile an hour upwards. But I was just slugging away, and he came down, he came back, and he just rested for me a little bit, and he just goes, "You can tuck in there if you like, because we're going to come back down this way, and we're about 100 meters from the peak." And he goes, "So you can just stay there if you like." And you don't know me at all. And for the next 100 meters, I just went with pure bile and hatred that got me to the top. And then I just saw him smiling at the top.
Yeah, like
you went for it. You just went for it. Just
hook, line, and sinker.
Exactly,
pal.
Just tugging the tail of the tiger. But people have their motivations, and finding them is an interesting concept.
Yeah. But Did you call me yellow?
Oh yeah, exactly. He got my number that time, but he got me to the top.
Wow, that's awesome. I love that. All right, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you, Eddie?
Eddie.Dillon at CreditLogic.io. Mobile number.
Yeah, we can leave that one for the show notes. I put in this link now for this great app that Connor Murphy, who's former Techstars, former DataHug, that he's built, where it's intro. So I will put that into the show notes where people can click on if you would like an intro to Eddie, please click here, right? And we'll see, and that will come through to me, right? But we'll see how many we get out of this.
Pete will sell them on to you.
Yeah.
Oh, you sell them. You're a data company now. Money never sleeps. Data company.
Money never sleeps. All right. Thank you, Eddie. Great to have you on the show.
Guys. Yeah,
Thank you.
Great to see you.
Money never sleeps, pal.
That does it for this week, folks. And thanks to Eddie for opening up his mind and helping us figuring out why he does what he does. Links and show notes for this episode on moneyneversleeps.ie, so check us out online. Remember, if you or a colleague need help attracting or retaining great talent for your fintech or financial services company, it is highly advisable that you build a relationship with the team at Top Tier Recruitment, as they really know their stuff. You can find them at toptierrecruitment.com. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for editing and recording this podcast. As for me, I increase the odds of startup success. Get in touch through the contact page on norioventures.com, and you can follow Owen on Twitter at OwenFitzgerald9. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!